Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. It's always a pleasure for us to get together for these discussions, and I pray that you are blessed wherever you are and are preparing for the days that are approaching quickly. And this is one of those broadcasts, kind of a serious broadcast in many ways, because we need to be aware of the things that are going on in the earth, and many different things that are happening that um, are foretold in the scripture. And we knew they were coming, but nevertheless, it still requires that we watch. That's the reason why we do these. And for those of you that are joining us for the first time, we do these weekly broadcasts to catch up with the things that are going on in the earth, news headlines, and things that are happening that fulfill Bible prophecy or are in that direction. And if you're watching too many updates and getting too much information, that can be very overwhelming. And one of the things we like to say around here is we like to be informed without being overwhelmed. And so we like to take the 10,000-foot view, uh, look at some of the trends, pick up the patterns. What do we call ourselves? Pattern recognition experts. And so we pay attention to the patterns that are emerging and try not to become overwhelmed and overcome by fear or any extra concerns. Again, the more we know, the more aware we are, the easier it is for us to make plans accordingly and make intelligent choices. And so I am thankful for those of you that take the time to sit with us, and we're honored by those of you that share the link and subscribe to the channel and encourage us along the way. Thank you for your comments. Your words of encouragement really mean a lot. This is a labor of love. You'll notice we don't have any advertising. We don't have any sponsors. We don't have any. We're not selling anything. You'll never find things for sale. We just, freely we receive, freely give, and we're so thankful for the members of Remnant House that make this kind of work possible. Without the members of this house, we wouldn't be able to do this. So, thank you. Thank you, members of Remnant House, for your faithfulness. Amen and amen. And today we've got a few headlines. And for those of you, again, following us for the first time, we do have a website where we aggregate all of the different headlines that we talk about. So we can kind of keep a running tab on the things that we're keeping an eye on. We have a very simple site. It's got a nice interface where you can go on over, bookmark that, remnantwatch.com. You'll find all the stories, like I said, that we've discussed all the way back since our very first broadcast. So, very easy to keep up, very easy to keep track. And I do believe that it's been very effective. We've gotten some really good feedback, a lot of good comments. And, we can't do anything about the links. Like, once you click on a link and you're traveling to that website or wherever that story is, we can't control that. There's going to be ads. There's going to be all kinds of stuff going on. So what we try to do is just on our end is, eliminate as many of those, sort of nonsense distractions and click here, clickbaity things. And we stay away from a lot of that, and we try to filter that out. So hopefully that's been a blessing to you so far. Like I said, the feedback has been really good. So let's get into the news. And for those of you that have been paying attention, you know that the situation, of course, in the Middle East continues to heat up. Biden is, of course, facing pressure to confront Iran after U.S. troops are killed. And so this is all of a sudden getting a lot hotter, and we're seeing a lot more pressure politically being applied to respond. U.S. President Joe Biden faces intensifying pressure to confront Iran directly after the country's proxies killed 3 American soldiers in a drone strike in Jordan over the weekend, risking precisely the wider regional conflict that he's trying to avoid. As persons familiar with the U.S. position who asked not to be identified discussed private discussions, said it was clear that a strike, which also wounded at least 34, would force a stronger response than what the U.S. has done so far in the weeks since Hamas militants attacked Israel on October 7th and touched off a new conflagration in the Middle East. And we're definitely watching that conflagration with a lot of interest, because the more we watch that, the more suspicious we are. We've been, since it first came and first erupted, we've been watching with great skepticism uh, of some of the things that are being reported. And we see now that there's a perpetual effort. It's continuous. It's nonstop effort to try and drag superpowers into a fight. Now, it's kind of like a crime scene. You have to kind of look at things and say, who benefits? If you, all you amateur detectives out there, all of you sleuthers who, we all grew up on detective stories. Well, we need to Perry Mason this thing. I just dated myself right there, but we need to really think about this and go, who benefits? What's the reason for the drive to war? Who gets um, benefit out of that? And I think we can look at some of the economic indicators and some of the things that are collapsing to get our answer. And so this is very, very dangerous time, as power is shifting back to the people in a very dramatic way. And this is undermining the status quo like never before. And now, on top of the pressure that is mounting on the Biden administration to respond to Iran's, again, allegedly Iran's provocation, we don't really know who does these things. We just get told that it's these players. So we're told these guys did it. We might find out 6 months from now that they weren't involved at all. And that's one of the things that we keep tracking, is how the present media is manipulating, and later on comes and cleans the story up when no one cares. Okay, so these are very dangerous times. And again, so now the pressure is to sort of disconnect its obvious support for the Zionist state. Biden administration discussing slowing some weaponry deliveries to Israel to pressure Netanyahu, who, of course, is under huge fire right now. We're going to talk about that here in a moment. But the bottom line is that the more this goes on, the more eyes that are on it, the less favorably it's coming out for Israel, which, again, we've all been really watching this stuff, not to pick a side, but to be on the side of life. But I got to tell you, look at who's causing most of the death. And you can't help but say, I can't support that. I can't encourage that. And so there's a lot of pushback going on. U.S. officials are considering pausing or slowing some arms shipments to Israel to convince the government to heed U.S. calls to scale back its military assault in Gaza. The Biden administration is discussing using weaponry sales to Israel as leverage to convince the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to heed longstanding U.S. calls to scale back its military assault in the Gaza Strip. And so the pressure is on to pull back. And as I shared with you guys, and I think you're all really, really sharp, right? So you guys know, why wouldn't they want to step back? Well, because they know that's when the Nuremberg trials start, right? That's when people start to do investigations into war crimes, into who did what. They want to keep the heat of battle going so that they don't have to stop and let cooler heads prevail. That's a really obvious thing. And I think that we're all starting to pick up that, there's definite manipulation of facts, information. We can't find clean hands anywhere. Meanwhile, what we do know our victims are the children, the women and children that are caught in this crossfire, innocent men that are not involved in any form of aggression and are being killed. I mean, thousands, 20 some odd thousand people so far have died in this conflict. So you're not going to convince most of the world that these were all, enemy combatants. Okay, there are no children that are enemy combatants. So they're losing the high ground big time, and appropriately so, because the way they've executed this has been indefensible. It's just flat indefensible as far as I'm concerned. The way that this whole thing has been executed, and I think most people, agree. Yeah, there's no clean hands anywhere. I don't think you can take a side on either side and feel like you're 100% right. But I can tell you this: anytime you're seeing dead children, anytime you're seeing civilian things being blown up, these can't possibly be military targets. And how many hospitals, how many journalists, something like over 110 journalists have been killed in this conflict. That's horrific. So they're basically killing the observers. You're killing the eyewitnesses, the account holders. So this is not going to last much longer before more and more pressure is brought to bear, and I believe it's going to dramatically affect the nation state of Israel and its political governments, and going forward how it proceeds, because we no longer, the modern world no longer has any questions about their willingness to do just what they're doing. So this has been eye-opening in many ways. It's not been good. And I encourage you all as the remnant continue to pray for those in harm's way who are in danger now as a result of this. And of course, there's always those war hawks, those people who are, in power, who press Biden to target Iran directly over the soldiers' deaths. Well, they want to crank this up. The same old creatures come forward, and it's so predictable. It's almost like you can cue them. You almost have like music. They're coming on stage. President Biden is facing calls from congressional hawks to escalate attacks on Iran, linked targets, including within Iran itself, in response to the death of 3 U.S. service members in a drone attack in Jordan. So, of course, cue the moral outrage. Okay, cue the disgust at the death of people that are, again, in this whole theater, everybody's in danger. Did you hear 34 injured? That could have been 34 more dead. So this is a dangerous time. It's called war. And so what are they doing? They're putting people in harm's way to get high ground. Because once they have high ground, you did this, now we can come for you. Okay, now we have the moral outrage. We have the support of the international community. And they're all starting to realize that, the wartime only lasts so long, but, the peace afterward could be a long jail sentence if what you did was criminal. Okay, and so there's a lot of attention that is now drawing in this region, which I think is very appropriate. And I do believe, as I've been saying to you, that we are moving so ever so quickly to the prophecy where we will beat our swords into plowshares. I think we are all seeing the absolutely crazy nature of warfare and how little it really solves. I mean, I think that's kind of the big week, the big sort of elephant in the room is, what is this solving? Shoot a few more missiles off. That'll fix everything, right? It doesn't work, folks. And in fact, it perpetuates this warfare mentality, because then the next guy says, well, I'm going to get an even bigger missile and I'm going to get even more guns. So this just perpetuates and escalates continuously. And in fact, speaking of escalation, here we go. We're seeing, and this is one of those we've been watching all year type of situations, right? We've been paying attention to this entire year. And China is now sending several warplanes, Navy ships toward Taiwan after the U.S.-China talks wrapped up. Okay, so National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan announced on X that he wrapped up talks with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Saturday, and their response was, I mean, you can't make this up, folks. This was their response. They decided to send warplanes and Navy ships toward Taiwan. It's behind a paywall, but you get the idea. And so I laugh a little bit because, what does that say for your diplomacy? What does that say? What does that say for your negotiating skills, right? So it's like, whoo, man, things are heating up over there. And so again, it's like they're setting conflicts in a row. Like, well, we're gonna start this one when right about when we're wrapping this one up. You remember the one in Eastern Europe that everyone is slowly forgetting about. Kind of interesting, don't you think? And then all of a sudden it's, hey, we got the Middle East conflict, Middle East war, hey, got this problem. And meanwhile, they're stoking the next one when this one ends. So they want you to go from conflict to conflict to conflict. And if you're watching this, you're seeing it because you saw them do this for the last 2 years. We've been hearing about this ramp up and offensives and counteroffensives and all this, pump to support conflict. And as that's waning now, right? So you're barely hearing about it because that was a fool's errand. Now it's this conflict which they're stoking, right? And then they're getting the next one going, right? So getting back to the previous one, I mean, we got to keep this fire rolling. We can't take our eye completely. We went over to the east for just a minute. Now we're going to come right back because fierce battles were going on in after Jordan attack kills 3 U.S. troops. So now fierce battles in Gaza are happening. So, once again, they're saying, oh man, it's stepping up even further. Deadly fighting and airstrikes rock besieged Gaza on Monday, a day after an attack that killed 3 U.S. troops in Jordan, heightened fears of a wider regional conflict. So again, the moment they think they have high ground, the moment they feel like they have justification, they release the hounds. Israeli bombing of Gaza Strip killed 140 people overnight, including 20 members of one family. Wow. I'm sorry. There's just no way to justify that, said the health ministry and the Hamas-run Palestinian Authority. I'm sorry. You just lost me right there. I mean, if you didn't lose me the last 20 some odd thousand times, you've just lost me right there. The Israeli army, in its war sparked by the Hamas October 7th attack, said its troops had encountered and killed dozens of armed terrorists in battles in central Gaza. But of the 140 people that were killed overnight, 20 were members of one family. I mean, again, you can paint that picture however you want to. You're not fooling the remnant. We're seeing right through this. This is naked aggression. There's some very, very serious charges that have been leveled, you guys know about. And honestly, it is hard to defend against that. It is hard to stand there and justify this type of just naked bombing and attacking. And how do you justify 20 people in one family? How do you like talk yourself into that? If you're a military commander and your battle damage assessment comes back and they tell you that, by the way, you took out this whole family, you're going to tell me you're going to go to the microphone and be all proud of your battle damage assessment? I'd be crying back there. And I think that little by little, it's going to start to hit people what they're really endorsing and what they're behind and what they're encouraging. And we need to put a stop to all of this. It needs to stop immediately. The fact that there's anybody supporting, continuing this kind of behavior is utterly shocking to me. It truly is shocking. I got nothing with. I completely support law enforcement. You guys know that. I'm a veteran. I'm 100% behind law and order. And if there's bad guys, you should send the good guys in to get the bad guys. You don't kill everybody. Because there's some bad guys in say, I don't know, Phoenix, Arizona. Do you just bomb Phoenix? Do you just blow up the whole city because there's a few bad guys there? Or do you send in detectives and special forces and you get the bad guys? The bad guys. You don't blow up the whole city. You don't blow up half of Phoenix to get the bad guys and then justify, I'm sorry for the rant, but justifying killing civilians because you're chasing bad guys. And that's horrible policing. We would never accept that in our nations, any of our nations, any civilized nation. And so, again, I just cannot justify that. And I feel very sorry for anybody who is somehow wrapping their brain around that like that's a good thing. It is not. And it's a very sad moment in America, in world history. And I wonder if people aren't going to be a little bit, you know, how people talk about World War II and they say, like, where were you, and how dare you have not known what they were doing to these people and what have you. And they carried that the rest of their life. They had to deal with, gee whiz, I didn't even know this was going on. It feels like the same moment. Don't you feel like that, guys? It feels like a similar moment where people are going to, it's going to be, where did you stand on these things as they were unfolding? Things that we're finding out that were happening in Ukraine. That theater of operations isn't done yet. We're going to find out more about that. Okay. And as we go along, we're going to hear just how bad some of this stuff was. Okay. As a matter of fact, that's one of the things that's really been, coming out lately. In fact, there's a story here. Hold on, let me pull it up. Where they are talking about the crimes that were committed by, in Eastern Europe, right? So let me see if I can find it real quick, guys. I know it's on my... I thought it was on my list, but it's not. It must not be on my list for today. I thought I had it up here for tonight's discussion, but I do recall reading. Sometimes I read just a lot of stories, so I do recall reading that the Russians were putting in a complaint to France. Oh, here it is. They're putting an address to the Russian Duma, or to the Russian Duma is addressing the French Parliament. Here we go. Sorry about that, guys. And they will address the French Parliament regarding the presence of French mercenaries in Ukraine. So this is interesting. Officially, France is not engaged in military operations in Ukraine, but supports the latter by providing it weapons. So it's like, we don't want to fight. You guys go fight. And if French soldiers were involved in the fighting, the French Republic would be at war with the Russian Federation. And so Russia is basically informing them that without the people of France knowing it, the government of France sent special forces into Ukraine. Well, this is an act of war. And rather than simply just attack France, which really would have very little strategic defense against a Russian offensive, instead they contacted them and let them know this is cooler heads really prevailing in a attempt to avoid the all-out conflagration that I think there's different groups pushing really hard to create. So it's interesting to watch the push back and forth, those that are screaming, we're going to get you and we should attack you and all that, and others that are, behaving in an actually much more admirable way. This is much more what you would expect a leader of a civilized country to do, and say, look, are you certain you want to go to war with us? Was this your intention? And informing the people who will be the ones who suffer if obviously hostilities commence. And so I think it's very civilized behavior for a country that we're supposed to hate. We're all supposed to hate the Russians, right? Well, how come they're behaving themselves in a more civilized way than the ones we're supposed to be supporting? So that's an interesting question, don't you think, guys? I do. I think it's a very interesting question. And the pressure continues to mount to remove Netanyahu from power. And so, again, this is where we look when we're saying, who wants to keep the conflict going? More than 40 senior former Israeli national security officials, celebrated scientists, and prominent business leaders have sent a letter to Israel's president and Speaker of Parliament demanding that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu be removed from office for posing what they say is an existential threat. And we reported on this last week. They're not giving up. They continue to call him that. And I believe that the pressure is mounting because these war hawks, those that I don't know how they benefit, I don't know why they are this way, but they are. And they were prophesied in the scripture to be this way. And so they keep wanting to point at, there's the bad guy, there's the bad guy. And the more they do that, the more the world is going, it's not quite convincing. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Take a look at this. You're seeing these types of headlines in this last week. Iran is now a legitimate target for Israeli missile strikes, senior minister says. And Nar Barkat tells the Telegraph that Israel can afford to keep fighting. And as big as crisis is, it is also a really big opportunity. What? Right? And so again, you got to realize that you've got some very different thinking in the world regarding war and what it does. And for those that are, if you're in the construction business and you build bridges and buildings, well, then maybe war is awesome, right? Maybe you think, all right, if you're in the, trafficking business, I'm pretty sure, displaced families are a real big a boon to your business. So it depends on what you do, right? Depends on what where do your opportunities lie, in people's misery. And yeah, exactly. We need to follow the money trails. We got to figure out why these things are happening. And it is horrifically sad. And again, like I said, it's not one place. There's various places that there's conflict being stoked up. So it's, this is one of the prophecies we saw in the book of Revelation, where peace is taken from the earth. Russia's top diplomat accuses the US, South Korea, and Japan of preparing for war with North Korea. This was just recently released. Russia's top diplomat accused the United States, South Korea, and Japan on Wednesday of preparing for war with North Korea. Like, again, America doesn't have enough problems, wants to now pick a fight with China, which, military forecasters predict we can't win. And why not take on another conflict? Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told a UN news conference that this new military bloc brought together by the United States is building up military activity and conducting large-scale exercises. The United States, South Korea, and Japan have described their combined military drills as defensive in nature. Defensive in nature. So nobody's buying the defensive in nature excuse, which I think is smart. Because it's funny how defensive drills can suddenly become offensive. And, the world is picking up on these things. So speaking of conflict, I don't know if you guys are paying attention internal to the United States. If you're outside the United States, keep us in prayer, because things are heating up on our southern border. And the Border Patrol, in response to the Supreme Court decision, you would have thought they'd have been in there cutting that wire, right? Isn't that what the Supreme Court said, that they're allowed to cut the wire if they have to protect people's lives? Well, apparently the Border Patrol has no plans to remove wires set up by Texas amid feud with the Biden administration. Texas and the federal government are battling over border security, and apparently there are no plans whatsoever to cut those wires and start, reopening those things. And so, again, some of this is theater, but it is a very dangerous place and a dangerous moment. In fact, even Putin warned about it as he was commenting, and he said that Putin ally ominously suggests Texas could launch civil war in the U.S., a civil war. And Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia and ally of current Russian President Vladimir Putin, made an ominous comment on Friday about Texas potentially starting a new civil war in the United States. And there's a lot of people that are saying the same thing. So, again, this was something that wasn't even on the radar. 10 years ago. And we had prophetic word that this was going to come about. And it was very early. So we got it very early on. And we've literally watched this unfold like a slow moving train wreck. Okay. And what's starting to happen is I think we're up to 27 states now that are standing with Texas saying, yeah, no, we're not doing this. Okay. So governors are pledging support. Look at this. Governor pledges to ship razor wire to Texas if Biden stops Abbott. And Noem is the, I believe, South Dakota governor. Noem says governors are commanders in chief too. Ooh, that's a listen. The states are sovereign. A Republican governor of an interior state pledged to drive a razor wire on the border herself if Texas Governor Greg Abbott is stopped by President Biden or federal forces from retaining operational control of a park in Eagle Pass. And so that was the point of the conflict, was this place called Eagle Pass. And this is now secure, by the way. I just saw a video this over the weekend where they went from thousands of people. She's from South Dakota. Thousands of people coming through Eagle Pass daily to zero. They went to zero. That's how many now are passing in that spot. So it proves the effectiveness of fencing and walls. I mean, nothing we didn't know, but razor wire has a pretty good deterring effect. And so you're going to prevent people from, large scale. You might still have that person that gets through. You might still have that determined person, but not the thousands that you were just letting walk in. And so I think that, there's cooler heads again starting to prevail, and looking for ways to salvage, what's left. And again, the United States is in a very poor position to be threatening or attacking anyone. As a matter of fact, it's having such difficulty. The U.S. having such trouble filling its ranks in the military that it's going to lower its bar so that it can enlist people that did not graduate or even have a GED. Okay, so this is really interesting. The U.S. Navy will start to enlist applicants who have not graduated from high school or obtained a GED as the service continues to struggle with its recruiting goals. And so while on the one hand, they're blubbering around the world how they're going to attack this and practice that, they can't keep their basic recruiting going on. And honestly, I think that again, the sentiment is shifting where, maybe some young people are rethinking that as a career choice, right? And so, and as they employ increasingly political charged tactics in what should be kind of an apolitical group, that is what I believe causing a lot of the problems. So I think you're right there, brother. There's people that are going, why do I want to die for or fight for some of these things? And so it's really it's an amazing moment when you really think about it. Now, again, that doesn't stop them from making these warnings. And so I think you're going to keep seeing these kinds of warnings for a while. Biden is continuing to give chilling warnings about nuclear warnings over attacking Iran after kamikaze drones kill troops. So, they're going to talk about this. This is going to be a part of the fear porn. And again, remember that what they're really after, everybody in my history class will tell you they're really after is mind control. That's who they're really after. They're really after controlling populations and controlling the way you think, and placing in your thinking narratives so that gives them cover for the things that they want to do. Now, we've been watching, some of these things I believe are cover story for what really is going on. And part of what's really going on is an economic collapse as the shift away from the US dollar, as we shift away from control matrices and governmental mechanisms that prohibit the free trade that I believe many people are now championing in other parts of the world. And so, as a result of this, there's greater scrutiny. And part of the challenge that China is now facing is the results of some of its policies, which I believe have come home to roost. As a matter of fact, one company that drew a lot of attention because there were a lot of rumors that it was involved in trafficking. And there were rumors, or if you remember, this company had a ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal and was, a subject of great discussion in the news. Well, now this company, Evergrande, has reached an economic point where the massive Chinese real estate developer with 300 billion in debt is ordered to liquidate by a Hong Kong court. And so a Hong Kong court on Monday ordered the liquidation of real estate developer China Evergrande Corp. Evergrande is the world's most indebted developer with more than 300 billion in total liability. So this goes to show you, because, again, how do you get there? You get there because they're piling things in to cover up the true economic condition of a country or a region or an economic sector. And so basically lies are coming to roost. A profitable company wouldn't have trouble meeting its obligations. But if you were deriving your profits, if you will, or your revenue from nefarious behavior that has now since been shut down by security forces in different countries that are alerted to your activity, that'll put you out of business. So it shows you, and I think what we're going to see is companies that were involved in some sketchy things suddenly can't pay their bills. Suddenly they are no longer profitable. And frankly, they're not profitable because their real business went out of business. So they weren't really in the real estate business or the shipping business or whatever other thing they pretend to be in. They really were in some other business. And so the rest was a cover story. And that's why I believe you're going to be seeing a lot of companies in the near term that are going to collapse or completely close doors. I believe that's why you're seeing some banks, and you're going to see more that simply close their doors because they're essentially, in a roundabout way, admitting that they don't have legitimate business. And speaking of closing doors, Argentina is going through some shake and shake again. If you remember, Argentina just elected a new president, and Argentina rejected the BRICS alignment. It would have been invited to join BRICS, if you remember, and they rejected the invitation, wanted to stay in the West. And boy, oh boy, is that ever starting to show itself for the decision that it is. Now you have a general strike going on in Argentina, which sees its first great challenge to Malay's reforms. And the reason why this is a really important story is because if Venezuela is falling apart, if Argentina is falling apart, if Chile starts to fall apart, if Guatemala and El Salvador and Panama, these countries are the places from which we are seeing the migrant surge. So as these countries devolve, this puts even more migrant pressure from the South. Libertarian leader Javier Milei will face on a general strike on Wednesday called by Argentina's biggest union. And the workers are expected to down tools in their thousands to take to the streets in protest as part of a mobilization called by the opposition-aligned Confederación General del Trabajo. So basically a general confederation of workers, an umbrella union grouping, which has 7 million members. So they're coming for these policies that, again, are just more efforts at controlling people and restricting movement, restricting freedom, and restricting their ability to affect commerce. And so, again, when you have restrictions, then you don't have freedom, you have liberty, you have controlled freedom. And this is what they want. They want to control everything. And that, unfortunately, doesn't have a good future. And we talked about this again. For all their saber rattling, they aren't in position. This is one of the stories I wanted to put together with. I kind of got these mixed up, but the story with Russia confronting France, well, um, this goes together with that. So we were just talking about them basically informing the French people. Well, here's some more information that the EU residents might want to know, that the EU is not prepared for potential armed conflict with Russia. The newspaper explains that since the end of the Cold War, the number of the armed forces in EU countries have decreased by 2.5 times, from 3.4 million troops in 1989 to 1.3 million in 2022. And the European Union does not have the necessary defense potential to independently confront Russia without support from the United States in case of a potential armed conflict. And the United States is going to be spread real thin if it's starting conflicts with China, North and South or North Korea, and is involved in the Middle East. You see where we're headed here, folks. So this is not good. And basically, Russia is letting them know that they know. So we know that you can't really defend yourselves if we attack you, which basically reveals um, Russia doesn't have ambitious plans to take over all of Russia, all of Europe, or they just would, because apparently they can't be stopped. And you know, the U.S. is having recruiting problems. I honestly don't believe that the United States can fight a multi front war against superpowers. You might be able to fight multi front wars against, Somalia, maybe, in small countries and so on. But when you're starting to take on countries like Russia and China, um, it's a different scenario. And so basically, what we're seeing is they have to come up with a different plan. And frankly, folks, a lot of what they're doing is shifting populations, destroying national unity, and essentially turning the world into one just big worker farm. And that way, it doesn't matter where you are, you work for them. And that's really what they're after. That's what they ultimately want. And that's what I believe is pictured in the book of Revelation. And in fact, in some regards, they're already accomplishing this. Many people are now waking up to questions about where their food is sourced from and who's involved and what hands are touching it. And this report is actually pretty disturbing as far as I'm concerned, because look at what they're doing. They're basically taking prisoners in the United States, so that gives them an economic incentive to imprison and to sentence. So this is kind of scary when you think about it. When you think about the implications, prisoners in the U.S. are part of a hidden workforce linked to hundreds of popular food brands. So again, there are a lot of ways that lower IQ minds think of to solve problems that are very temporary, and once they are exposed, they won't last. And so, if this has been helping the economy, it'll go away. Watch this: a hidden path to America's dinner tables begins here. An unlikely source: a former Southern slave plantation that is now the country's largest maximum security prison. Did you hear that right? Let me read it again. A former Southern slave plantation that is now the country's largest maximum security prison. Wow. Unmarked trucks parked with prison raised cattle roll out of the Louisiana State Penitentiary, where men are sentenced to hard labor and forced to work for pennies an hour or sometimes nothing at all. After rumbling down a country road to an auction house, the cows are brought up by a local rancher and then followed by the Associated Press another 600 miles to a Texas slaughterhouse that feeds into the supply chains of giants like McDonald's, Walmart, and Cargill. So again, we don't realize the various ways in which the baling wire and duct tape that is the economies of the world, and a lot of this kind of stuff is there in the numbers. Oh, we had a great month. Yeah, how much of that was due to slave labor out of Southern slave plantations? You cannot make this up. if that isn't it being rubbed right in your face, folks, I don't know what is. That to me is very, very scary. And I think that it's also revealing to all of us just how precarious a lot of the economies of the world are. Like we find out that last week when we talked about, and this is a very important element, we talked about the agricultural products coming out of Ukraine, right? So you would think, oh, it makes sense. Let's let the Ukrainians sell their goods here in our economy, and we'll have abundance, we'll have extra, right? Not even thinking, not even realizing until after they did it, the devastating effect that was going to have on the existing agricultural system in France and in the EU, right? So they don't think about these overlapping. They're always band-aid doing. Everything is band-aid. Everything is just right now. Fix it just for now, and we'll think about later. And they stay in this mode. Well, this continues to create. It's a guaranteed way to continue to live in crises. And so now they figured out that, hey, they can't let food be sold that cheap. Why? They'll put farmers out of business. Never mind that people might starve. Forget all that. We don't care about the food, or we don't care about people starving. We want to protect the economy. That became more important. The protecting of the economic prospects became more important than feeding the people of Europe. That should be all the people of Europe need to hear. They should be absolutely done with these fake leaders when those are the kinds of decisions that are made. And we're seeing more and more evidence of the way in which the real machinations work. And I don't think anything really exposes the real sort of machinations of power than this next and probably last story. I don't know how much time we have left, but this story is really something. This is coming right out of our home state here in Arizona. And we, those of you that may have been following along, there was an audio recording that revealed the moment that a senior Republican figure, he was actually the chair of the Republicans here in Arizona. And so he had to resign. It reveals a moment that a Republican figure tried to bribe Carrie Lake not to run for Senate. And her reaction is why they didn't want her to run, because she isn't bribable. An audio recording obtained by DailyMail.com reveals the extraordinary moment when what appears to be Arizona's top Republican official tried to bribe populist firebrand Carrie Lake not to run in the state Senate race. Jeff DeWitt, 51, chair of the Arizona Republican Party, can be heard asking Lake, a close ally of Donald Trump, to name her price to stay out of politics for 2 years. Name your price for any amount. Tell us how much you need. 10 million, 15 million, 20 million. What do you need, Carrie? So you can just sit this one out. So we can go on without you. Any questions that there was a fix, or at least the wind was certainly blowing against, even within their own party? So these are the kinds of things that are coming out because of you. Saints, you all continue to pray for light. You continue to pray for the exposure of that which is hidden. We are getting more and more reports now that we heard about that one tunnel, right? Well, there's more that are now coming to light and being exposed. And those are the kinds of things that we want to see in this hour, because as those things are exposed, then those that were participating in them definitely get affected, obviously, by that. And a lot of that is going to keep happening because the cover that was the economic system, which was providing financial cover so you can pay, bad guys got to pay other bad guys so they can keep doing their bad things. When they run out of money, they can't pay for the bad guys that cover the bad guys. You know what I'm trying to say? Okay. So as things tighten up and as the economies tighten, it's one of those side effects they don't really think about until they're facing it. And it's really hitting around the world. China's stock markets and this is a story I meant to hit, has lost over $6 trillion as economic woes deepen. So they are taking it out on China economically. The Chinese stock market entered 2024 with more of a whimper than a roar, having lost a staggering 6.3 trillion since reaching its peak 3 years before. Meanwhile, the world's second largest economy continues to be buffeted by the same headwinds as the last few years, even after Beijing reported it reached its goal of a 5% GDP growth. And again, they're committed to these numbers, but that's also what encourages them to, build buildings that nobody's going to live in and things like that. Investor confidence has been dampened by deflationary pressures, geopolitical uncertainties ahead of the 2024 U.S. elections, an economic slowdown, and a debt-laden real estate market in a country where 70% of household wealth is tied up in real estate that is grossly overvalued, saints. So this is a house of cards, the likes of which are like the 2008 collapse, except that it will be all across the earth. Frankly, I don't believe their system can recover. There will need to be a new system, which is your opportunity for your jubilee, for you to be, they cannot cross currencies, so they can't lend you Federal Reserve notes and then demand you pay back something else, right? So they can't do that, which means if they do have to revamp the system, which it looks like they will, then essentially you're going to be getting out of that debt. There was a couple other stories, since we have a few minutes, I wanted to share with you. By the way, the UK Army chief is warning its citizens that they should be ready to fight in a possible land war. So don't you think that's interesting, that they're warning their people to, prepare for that? And another thing that's indicating, I think, the economy in the real world is the number of Gen X and millennials that are filing bankruptcy. This has reached a pretty high level. So let me just throw this on the screen real quick before I let you go. This is, again, it's not just you guys. It's not everybody's being affected. And this is judgment of Elohim coming down upon them. And it's coming down now. It's coming down to the street level. An uptick in bankruptcies, assistance among Generation X and millennial signals a burgeoning debt crisis, overshadowing recent economic optimism, legal experts told Newsweek. This is in contrast to recently issued positive economic data. And of course, they always want to point, they always want to make it sound like, everything is recovering fine and we're doing great. Excuse me. But that's just not true. And so there's a lot of difficulty in our world, and a lot of people are feeling that. And it's becoming quite a challenge. And I think that there's going to be those that are going to be looking for really different solutions. And that, I think, brings us to our final story for tonight. I don't know if you're familiar with Bill Gates and his purchase of real estate, farmland, right? You guys are aware of that. We've covered that throughout this last year, at least once or twice. We've shared a story about that. Well, apparently he's not the only super rich guy who's buying bunches of land with the intent of getting people to get together. And Elon Musk is planning to build his own futuristic new city in Texas. Wow. Texas. Isn't that interesting? And they're calling it, I don't know why they're calling it Snailbrook, but okay, Snailbrook. Elon Musk is famous for having big, outlandish ideas, but one of his biggest is to build his own city in Texas with 3,500 acres near Austin, Texas. And they're trying to incorporate the town called Snailbrook. Snailbrook. That's the name they're going with, folks. That's where people are gonna live, in the town of Snailbrook. I think that's kind of funny. It's interesting to see these different solutions that some are coming up with. And so It's going to be an interesting time period as we go forward, folks. These are going to be very, very bizarre things as we watch. Um, and I'm very grateful for those that are calling for justice. Um, I'm grateful to see those that are no longer covering for those institutions that are responsible for harming children. We have a 0% tolerance for these things. So there isn't a way back if you've got bodies underneath your buildings. There's no way back. Your legitimacy is completely gone, and I believe Elohim is exposing these things so that we can see them for what they are. But I do believe that the progress that's been made has been because of the awakened saints. And so let me encourage those of you that are getting more and more of a pull to intercession. Some of you are really, really strongly being yanked on. Some of you in the middle of the night, you can't even go to bed till you pray. And Elohim does this. He puts a burden on our hearts to pray for our communities. You don't know who's in trouble in your community, in your region, and Elohim may be arresting you to intercede on behalf of these victims who are being harmed in horrific ways. And so we need to continue to pray, saints, for light in every area, for more and more light to shine, for all the hidden places to be exposed, for all the dark plots to be exposed, right? So their plans don't work. And you hold the key to that, because your prayer, the Bible tells us, Scripture tells us that the prayer of the righteous man availeth much. And so we call upon you, brothers and sisters, children of light, children of Messiah, followers of the way, the truth, and the life, to pray, to cry out, to ask for mercy in this time, especially for the innocent victims who are the underbelly of many of these things that we're really seeing have to do with control of people in that very brutal way. And so let's pray against forces of slavery, those that would enslave mankind. Let's pray for continued light. Let's pray that people would find their fold and connect together one with another, even as you all have done here on this channel. Connecting one another with one another is critical. This is how we overcome. And so let me encourage every one of you who are standing in faith to not give up hope in this hour. We have come this far because of courageous people who have believed Elohim, who stood in faith in the gap and prayed for light to shine. And so it shines. So this is your fight. We are detailing your fight. We are chronicling your victories. And so now we need to continue to pray for all the halls of government power, for all the places where decisions are being made, for light to shine, that the power of the wicked one would be destroyed by the brightness of the King's coming. Well, that's it for tonight's report. I'm thankful for every one of you that, again, joined with us. Please like and share the content if you would be so kind. And we certainly appreciate your comments. We appreciate your insights and things that you may think we need to know. Come on over to our discussion board at remnanthouse.org, where we have some additional information and things we share just amongst each other. And you may find that edifying. So we encourage you to do that. Certainly encourage you to join us each week for our Shabbat services. I'm sure you'll be blessed. Well, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Good night.